Hello, everyone, and welcome to Yanks Footy. This is part of the rebranding of Stars and Stripes Soccer. The new host for this show, along with me, is
Hello,
Roberts.
guys.
So this is the day after the Group D finalization, which was Colombia winning the group and Brazil taking second. So they'll be playing against Uruguay. Um, so we're going to kind of pretty much focus on the failures of the Copa America, like what should be done as for like players, or if we need to change the coach, which both of us have agreed off camera that we should. So yeah, that would be the main focus for this episode. I'll let you begin on what you want to see on the roster changes.
So this Copa, the way it's went, a lot of the players are complacent and have just, guys like McKinney, he's had, including the friendlies, he's had 5 games. We've just seen nothing from him. That gives me a reason to think he should still be a locked-in starter. He's someone that needs to have pressure on his position. Same with Adams, although I'll give him a little break because of coming off of an injury, but that's also down to coach making poor decisions there. Ream, just on age, needs to be reevaluated. Turner, both his distribution and shot stopping at times have been questionable, to say the least, I would say, and need to be looking at more goalies because Horvath and Sean Johnson aren't going to fill that spot up either, at least to the level they should be. Shaq
Mm-hmm.
Moore, I know he's just there to replace Dest, but he doesn't really need to be an option. I know he didn't see minutes, but it's that time's passed. Um, CCV and Miles Robinson, both of them, I know Robinson didn't really see minutes, but if he's not seeing minutes, there's no reason not to bring in someone younger, someone like Neil or Trusty, someone else to fill those spots. And CCV, he's got the distribution, but he's issues defending. That he gets gosh. And then
There you
uh Way, and obviously the red card, and just even outside of that, he's not, with club or country, been the best production wise. He's been better with us than he has at Juve or Lille before, but that's a position that shouldn't be locked down by any means. You can easily, I'd say, switch, put Pulisic on the right, play Haji on the left, and that's would improve, hopefully, ideally, that, or at least put pressure on Way to raise his level. Um,
mm-hmm.
Aronson and De La Torre, both, again, guys that got little to no minutes, that if there's no reason, that if they're not going to play, there's no reason not to, at least in friendlies, bring in other guys to challenge that might be more likely to challenge for those positions.
Yeah, I agree on all that stuff as well. It's pretty much we need a revamping of the entire starting 11. Uh, and I think having Haji and Pulisic on the wing is probably what we need to do leading up to 2026 while we let some of these inner guys grow in age, like like Cole Campbell and a few others. Um, yeah, CCV, I know in some of the chess I mentioned, I think a lot of that has to do with him being in Scotland for
Yeah,
so long. Because even when you look at him when we play against Ron, that wasn't the case. He had some
yeah,
good defending moments.
him in
Um,
22 was really good. It's just since that, it's been a intense defensively fall off.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the Scottish Premier League because if you watch the performance in that league has been
Yeah,
dropping year by year. And if you ever watched him play with Celtic, yes, he has a very good ball distribution. I was talking to another individual playing FIFA that his pass accuracy within the Scottish Premier League was 91% and his long ball accuracy was 60%. So it's astounding. And it also kind of shows that they're not really feeling pressure defensively. So he's so rusted on that defensive side. But when it comes to distribution, that's not the
yeah,
case. But yeah, he needs to probably need to be passed over. Same thing with Miles, but it looks like we'll see him at the Olympics. So that'd be a real test for him if he can continue with this. I doubt it. I think he honestly be embarrassed at the Olympics. And as someone who played defense in
yeah,
a sport, like his defensive awareness is not there at all, and especially with the amount of pressure that we get in our box, he's whenever he's on the pitch and we're having to defend within the box, it goes eventually
yeah,
happens. Turner, yeah, I don't know what was with his ball stopping because one day it'd be really good and then the next two games it'd be just
yeah.
awful. And everyone has always said his ball distribution was awful, and that's why Stefan was the guy for so long because he has the ball distribution, and sometimes like yeah, his shot stopping wasn't the best, but he was pretty good. I know you remember his time when he was
Oh
at
yeah,
Columbus, uh, and when he was first at Man City, it was going well. Same thing at Frankfurt, but a lot of it has to do with the
I mean, I
injuries.
think
Um,
Stefan, if he would have even just stayed at Columbus, he would still probably be pushing Turner for that spot because I don't think Turner was that much better than him even when he took that spot. So it's really unfortunate for me
yeah,
that he went to City and just lost a lot of his level by just
yeah, I think it did work for him in the ways because it did help him train against some of the better players in the world. But yeah, playing inconsistently didn't really help, and that probably had an effect on his injuries.
oh yeah,
But yeah, I agree. It, I think the only reason why Turner got the spot for the World Cup was because Berhalter was feeling the pressure. That's my honest opinion.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, if Shaq Moore, yes, he did come in as a replacement, but that just kind of tells you where Berhalter rates him. And I get that they weren't going to call up Brian Reynolds because of the Olympics, but they call up a few players that were or are being looked at for the Olympics. There's no reason why they couldn't done the same for Reynolds. Just have him there just in case.
yeah,
So it looks like Shaq Moore is our third or fourth right back right now. But whoever comes in and takes over, that guy needs to be completely removed.
yeah,
And Sean Johnson, I get he's there because he has experience. He's only the third goalkeeper, but is honestly senseless at this point because he's a 35-year-old guy who he's not even where close to where he used to be within the MLS alone. It's time to bring in somebody who can honestly do something in the training. I get he's not going to play, but something in the training that can lead. I mean, with how bad he is now, like how's that honestly helping the players?
yeah.
Um, Brandon Anderson, go ahead.
I was just, there's no reason with Johnson. I mean, I get yes experience, but I mean even for Copa, you still have Ream who's got experience and is actually going to play. So there's no reason for him really to be there. I mean, I get that they're probably thinking, at least with this Copa, hey, Gaga and Schulte are going to be our guys for the Olympics, but they're not going to play,
Mhm.
assuming they're not going to beat out Turner, which I don't think is going to happen with Greg. He's not going to place Turner that easily. So they're not going to play. So bringing one of
Yeah,
those guys in to at least get them
yeah. I
familiar with
mean,
camp.
yeah. I mean, you have Chris Brady. Yes, right now I know we know somebody who does, but he's not above Schulte or Gaga. I mean, the roster rules for Olympics is 2 goalkeepers, and it looks like it's going to be Gaga and Schulte. But there's no reason why you couldn't have Schulte or Gaga in replacement of Sean Johnson, and then have Chris Brady on that roster if he was eligible.
Yeah.
Um, but who knows? Who knows with Chicago? Chicago is flaky about that stuff at times. But yeah, like I don't understand the whole story with Brendan Anderson because at one point he wasn't going to be on the roster. Then they brought him in, and then for Copa America it was a completely different story. He was one of the first names on that list, and he's definitely not living up to anybody's potential that had for him. Whoever comes in just needs to get rid of him. He needs to drop down to maybe like the third or fourth left wing attacking mid player for us. He shouldn't be an automatic name on this roster. I mean, we saw what he did in Bolivia against Bolivia. What was it the game against? Yeah, it was against Bolivia, and I was there personally, and it was like a terrible showing. It's typical of Brandon Anderson. He turns the ball over whenever he challenges the defenders.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have someone who could do that, and that is Pulisic, but he just can't live up to the level of Pulisic when it comes to 1v1.
Like I get he had a good end to the season at Union, but there was no reason for him to be one of the first guys you're calling up, or even one of the first guys off the bench right now. He's just not there yet. And
yeah,
I mean, I know people rag on Sargent a lot, but I'll take him on the wing to at least experiment with that. I mean, he's played it some, so we've seen what Aronson can and can't do. There's no need to keep rehashing that same thing over and over. At worst, you figure out, hey, Sargent or whoever else, Booth, whoever, can't do it either, or can do it is worse at that. Why not experiment with it? It just, the lack of willingness to change or experiment is just frustrating with this.
yeah. I would definitely take Taylor Booth over BA. I know some people are going to try and compare the leagues or whatever, or how things went with Booth, but before that final injury, like things were going very well for him, and he's much better on the ball than Brendan Anderson is. And when he is in form, he's very good at creating chances for his team. But yeah, like, going back to Sargent, I honestly don't care if Brendan Anderson has scored more recently than Sargent. Sargent is better on the 1v1. He has played on both sides. He's more clinical on the ball, and he creates more chances for his team, especially the year prior at Norwich where he was playing everywhere. So, and I honestly don't know on that one at this point. And the thing is with Haji too, I honestly don't know what took him so long to even play Haji. I mean, I totally played only 11 minutes. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And Pepe, I don't understand the reason why people are hashing at Pepe just because of one bad tournament, but he's definitely a super sub and needs to be stuck to that.
Yeah, my frustration with him in the tournament. I mean, yes, the chances against Bolivia were bad. You have to finish those, but like my main issue with him, I don't think anyone saying he's a terrible striker or shouldn't be on the roster. I think that's absurd. But my issue is I don't think in games like Uruguay or even Panama after the red card, where we're going to be, most of our chances come from counterattacking. We're not going to be lopping crosses into the box as much. He's not the guy to be bringing on there if Ballo is tired, hurt, whatever. That's not the guy to bring on there. That's the role I'd like to see Haji play, or even Sargent, one of those two over Pepe, just because they have more ability to connect on those counterattacking chances. more 1v1 things like that.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to what the tactics are. If we're going to play the Berhalter ball, then yes, Pippi is much better for
Yeah,
that than Balogun. But we do need to do more of a transition game to suit Balogun's strength. And then, yeah, on Luca Di Latore, I feel bad for him because he has worked very hard. He has performed well for us at times and has done quite well for Sota Vega for the most part towards the end until this towards the end of the season. But with some of the guys that are coming up, like McGlynn, like I think we need to start looking at McGlynn over him. But this also goes into what should happen to some of these players and what the formation would be. And I imagine that you agree that we should stop with this whole 4-3-3 stuff
yeah,
that he wants to do and go to the 4-2-3. And that was evident when BJ and Hudson were in charge. Like the 4-2-2-3, the 4-2-3-1 worked best for us. Those are the best game of football that we played in a long time.
yeah,
And the MMA just needs to stop being the go-to
yeah. Because
formation in the
that
midfield.
4-2-3-1 gives Geo plays to Geo's skills, while also it helps our midfielders because most of them seem to work better in that double pivot than in like the traditional
Mhm.
like 3-man that we've been seeing with Greg. I think Adams especially can be helped by a double pivot type play, um, and there's no reason not to change that. Even if you keep Greg, he needs to change something, and that formation is
Yeah, but knowing how he is, he's
that's
not
the
going
issue
to.
because that
And oh, you
okay,
can go ahead.
it's just sticking with that same 4-3-3 is just it's just banging your head against a wall, hoping for that wall to just not be there
Mhm.
suddenly. It's not gonna fix any of the real issues we have, and it does it doesn't play to anyone's strengths besides the coaches. That's all it's there for. It's not playing to
Yeah.
Rainer's strength. It's not playing to Ballow's strength. It's not playing to any of our midfielder strength. That's just doesn't do it for us.
Yeah, and when we did use the MMA in this tournament, I honestly thought it was our worst performance in that said match when we were using it. And going into that third game, that's what I was worried about is that are we going to bring back MMA? And of course we did. And yeah, some people say that, yeah, the 3 games that was our best game, blah, 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 but we weren't creating chances, to be honest. Like, closest chances that were even being created were by Gio on that left side. It wasn't being created by anyone in the midfield. It wasn't even being created by Pulisic for the most part. And since Berhalter loves to talk about his expected goals, that wasn't even 1%. And it wasn't even 1.0 expected goals. It was a 0.5. And there were 0 chances created.
It
And I think that we need to just put Todd Adams in the bench and have Johnny. Because Johnny is a more intelligent 6. Yes, he has a lot of traits of an 8 because that's where he originally started as, but he's far better at intercepting that ball and even blocking shots than Tyler Adams.
MMA is good. MMA is good if you're wanting to just sit there and hold out for a like 0-0 draw. Like if we could have got through the group with just a tie and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to win, sure, fine. I can stand us going back to that because it does defensively help. But when you win and you're pretty much you win and you're in as long as Panama doesn't go out there and beat the ever loving crap out of Bolivia. So you have to score. There's no reason to just eliminate pretty much all midfield creativity to play MMA. Like yes, Musa can advance the ball pretty well, but that's about it as far as you're getting any type of forward movement out of that group.
Yeah, and that's been a major problem with Berhalter. I mean, my original issue with him in the last cycle was the player selection. The other one was his lack of management during the game, which was very evident during this tournament. And the third was the fact that he was obsessed with chasing draws. It seemed like every time we played outside the U.S., or if things were getting dicey where we just needed at least a point to advance in anything, it was chase for that draw. And like you said, MMA is best for that, to basically hold down defensively and avoid goals. And it was pretty evident in the last match that he knew as long as the other game is a draw and our game is a draw, we'll advance. And he made it obvious too when he told everybody, "Oh yeah, it's 1-1 at Panama Bolivia game." I mean, at that point, it was him basically telling these guys, "Go for the draw."
That was infuriating because, like, when and you're in, and you're sitting there worried about what the heck is going on in the Panama game. The chances Panama was going to go in there and win that game with enough goal differential to overturn us beating Uruguay was not going to happen. There's very little chance of that happening. There is no reason to be sitting there going 1-1 when you still can win it and just not that score not matter at all. Those guys didn't need to know that it was 1-1.
Yeah.
They need to keep playing like win it, like you have to win to get in. Not, oh, we can play for a draw now. No, that's stupid.
Yeah. And as Herc Gomez said recently, is a loser mentality. And that's where I'm become very frustrated with him is why are we playing this loser mentality? Why are we always trying to chase these draws? As someone has said in one of the Twitter spaces, is Americans like a winner. We want to win these games. And honestly, I don't even know why like the leadership council on his team, which is I know of Pulisic, Weah, McKinney, and Tyler Adams, they are okay with that. I mean, I don't know where that mentality came from to be okay with having that loser mentality. But I mean, yeah, MMA would be good depending on the opponent and what the circumstances are, but it shouldn't be our de facto midfield. And I don't even know if we can even rely on it in the near future with how Adam is regressing so poorly after those injuries, and then McKinney at this point is exhibiting laziness and lack of care. So hopefully they could turn around and we can still use it from time to time, but I just don't know if we can. But that also goes in the fact that I think we need to have it as Gio at the 10, Johnny at the 6, and Musa at the 8 in a 4-2-3-1 formation.
Yeah, that would be something I would at least like to see. Will we see it? Who knows? But that would be something I'd like to see. Just something to give pressure to McKinney and Adams because, I mean, McKinney had a good season with Juve, and then he comes into this tournament and just looks probably the worst I've seen him, and that just that doesn't happen, or that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, especially in the USA jersey, like that is the worst performance and worst tournament he's been in. And I mean, we all saw the hookah pictures, and I know some people say, well, who cares, whatever type stuff. But when you look at his facial expression, and that was a game that we lost that everyone said we should have won, it doesn't give – it just rubs off to me that he honestly doesn't care. And I know when the camera showed the bench against Uruguay, there were some guys laughing and joking. It's like at this point, this is another reason why he needs to be fired is because of the fact that these guys are exhibiting that they don't care and they don't respect and they are not disciplined. They can say they're buddies of him all they want. That's great and all, but as one of my favorite political theorists, Machiavelli, has said, is you want to be loved but also feared at the same time, and we need a manager that's
Yeah,
like that.
I don't want, like, I know Carly Lloyd was saying like they hated their manager. I don't think you have to like hate your manager
Yeah,
for the manager to do his job.
no, you don't.
But I want there needs to be that balance where like yes, you get along with him and you have that like somewhat camaraderie with him, but you don't he is not supposed to be your best friend. It's needs to
Mm-hmm.
be a level of respect there, which is on everyone involved, but especially the coach.
Yeah, and it's also concerning too when you have your now assistant captain Tyler Adams saying that he never talks about soccer with Greg Berhalter whenever he's on the phone. Like I don't know what came to his mind to say, yeah, that's okay to say to the public. I mean, that's not a good impression whatsoever to anybody, and that's news to everybody as well. But I mean, I don't know. You could have a conspiracy theory that these guys are probably trying to sabotage this whole thing. Maybe they are, but based on what other people have said, they have some type of sourcing within the main five guys. That's not the case. These leadership guys need basically what you could say an ass whipping from their manager.
And it's you don't see this behavior from a lot of them at the club. So it's something that's going on with within the
Mm-hmm.
national team that's different than anything they're really doing for the club. I mean, yeah, you had McKinney's
Yeah,
behavior at Leeds, which was bad, yes, but like most of the rest of them, I mean, Pulisic, Adams, you don't see this at the club, or at least not to this extent. You don't.
mm-hmm. Yeah, they seem more professional on that. But was kind of talk about who we should start bringing in as well, besides the formation in these next coming camps. I mean, for me, I know some people have their opinions about Trusty. I honestly don't care. You had to put in the context he was playing for the worst team and other than Burnley in the Premier League. And obviously, CCB is not going to do it, and he has a better defensive awareness than Miles Robinson. So you can't go much worse than those two if you're bringing in Austin Trusty. Another one, we need to start integrating Jalen Neal because there's a good chance that he'll be there in
Yeah,
2026. And honestly, he should have been invited to the camp prior to the Copa America just to get his feet
yeah,
wet. Not participate, but just
yeah,
get the
like
feet wet. And that's not what
with the
happened.
stuff with Trusty, like he's not. I'm not suggesting he comes in and starts. I don't think that. I as long honestly at this point with the way our center backs are, you almost have to kind of just play Ream until he retires because
Which is a
yeah,
sad thing. It sounds like he's not going to. He wants to be there in
because I don't
2026, but he's just going to be
yeah,
way
I
too
don't
old.
there's no other center back outside of Richards. I mean, yes, I know he had a not great Copa, but he's still the best we have outside of Ream. There's no one else that I'm like
Hmm.
going to be screaming from the rooftops, "Hey, I want this guy to start with Richards." So I mean, at this point, you
Yeah,
keep Ream as long as you can and let other guys get a chance, including Trusty. I mean, yeah, not a great season, but in
yeah,
context, he's playing for a bad team, and he doesn't have to come in and start, but it's a different face. It's someone new. It's trying something that maybe, hey, he comes in and he works. He's that solution. If you're not trying everything when whatever you have already is not working very well, then you're doing something wrong.
hmm yeah. And I don't think we'll see a complete change in the center backs till 2030 because Weiner, Banks, those guys are too young. Jalen Neal's the closest thing, but he won't be a starter level, in my opinion. That's because when you look at his age, he's just
Yeah,
not going to be there. Brandon Craig isn't paying out. Taylor Hall is also too young. Same thing with Stuart Hawkins. The guys that you could potentially rely on in the future are just too young right now that they may not be there in 2026. But I think all those guys can definitely beat out every one of these guys if they were up the same age.
yeah. It's just like
But I mean, I think,
there's a big like
go ahead.
gap. Like there's nobody necessarily that besides maybe Neil that you see that within the next like 2 years you really think can come in and take one of those starting roles from somebody. It's just kind of it's that
Yeah,
group
yeah,
with like that's all around the same age, like Richards, Trusty, that age. I mean, even throw CCV in there. He's
mhm.
26, I think, so he's not that old. But there's that group, and then you
Yeah,
have like Neil and everybody else who are quite a few years younger who probably aren't going. I mean, hopefully someone is, but aren't going to be that level that's like going to come in and demand that
mhm.
starting spot in 26.
Yeah, yeah. And if we get a new coach, we need to bring back John Brooks. That will also kind of help with the age of Tim Ream. He also played far more minutes than uh, Tim Ream, from what I can recall looking at their stats. And he's a better quality center back. But I mean, we'll have to wait and see. And at least then, too, if he is around for 2026, he's still of a decent age as
Yeah,
well, where Tim Ream will be pushing
yeah. I
40.
get some people are still kind of hesitant with him because of just the way some of his club stuffs went. I know he had what was it in Portugal? I think it was. He didn't have a great time there, but I don't see a reason not to at least see what he can, if he can still bring something to improve the national team. I'm,
Yeah, and the whole thing with the Benfica stuff is that they value youth,
yeah,
and he was just too old. They're not going to be able to develop and sell him, and that's their whole goal is to develop and sell. But other players I want to see at this point be main guys for the time being is Leonard Maloney, Taylor Booth, and Brian Reynolds. I mean, yes, Brian Reynolds is not one of our better right backs,
I
but
mean
those who are close to age,
you
he's
don't
yeah,
have that.
you don't have really anyone else.
There's no depth in the right back position at all, really, outside of uh,
Yeah,
Scally and Dest. And I mean, you know what Shaq Moore brings. It's not very good. So it's time for something else there. And I'm not,
yeah, as a third
yeah,
option.
it's
Yeah,
not, he's not going to play, probably. He's not going to play most likely very much. I mean, you saw Shaq Moore didn't play at all, I'm pretty sure. Scally will take up all those minutes until Dest is healthy, and then those two will rotate. It's,
yeah, yeah. And Maloney needs to be part of this group because he is a good six, and he was one of the better six in the Bundesliga last season. I think he'd be a good replacement for Luca De La Torre because for some reason, as we have seen, Berhalter's playing him more of a six than an eight when he's an eight. I don't understand that, but that's how it is. So if we go to that 4-2-3-1, we have a good double pivot. You can either do Johnny or Adams or Johnny Maloney,
yeah,
whoever.
and I mean, I want to see,
And you still have Musa
yeah, I want
there.
to see Tespin too get some minutes, especially with him going up to Serie A this year. He had a good season last year. There's no reason to not
Mm-hmm.
give him a chance to. I mean, in midfield, we aren't really. I don't think we're at all lacking for depth in midfield
No, we
by
never
any
are.
means. I mean, even look at the Olympic team. There's no lack of depth for the what I'm assuming the players will be for the Olympic team. There's no lack of depth in midfield there. I mean, you got guys that from MLS who are going into Europe. I mean, you just had Morris get the move to Europe. I'm sure I'd guess like McGlynn's going to get one too. There's no lack of depth in that position.
Yeah, there's big talks that he will.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other players that we can discuss on bringing in, like Jack McGlynn, for example, being another one. We'll definitely have to see how Aiden Morris does. I don't know. I know you got your opinions about Aiden Morris. He's so shoddy with me right now because he does so well at club level, but he's not that good at the national team level, and it's disappointing because, to be honest, we can use him.
I'm not saying bring him into camp. I'm just like, it's just
friendly is when I think.
I mean, yeah, if we want to, if the next coach wants to bring him in a friendly, I'm not going to be mad about that. But I don't necessarily think he's to the point where he needs to be in camp.
Yeah,
I mean, you have other guys, Tessman, McGlynn, stuff like that, Maloney, who I'd like to see before him. It's just it's just an indication of the fact that there's no lack of depth there by any means.
Yeah. And quickly go over to goalkeepers. Yeah, obviously Gaga needs to be part of it. I mean, he needs to be the third choice. Horvath should still be there just because of experience, and he's not doing too bad at Cardiff. At least has somebody with some good European experience. And then we need to have Schulte if he happens to stay in Columbus for the rest of the season, which I imagine he would.
Yeah, I think.
Imagine he probably won't get moved to Europe till the end of the year. But he needs to be our first choice for this matter. He's of good age, and I don't think we could go much worse than him in comparison to Turner.
He's got a lot better ball distribution than Turner does. I mean, as the nature of the way Columbus plays, he has to, because they're a very possession-based team. And his shot stopping's phenomenal.
He's good on the PKs.
Yeah. I mean, I know people are probably going to...
Yeah. And Turner's absolutely awful at PKs.
And so there's no reason. I mean, he's 23 now. He'll probably get a move to Europe. I don't know if he'll get one in the summer. I don't know if Columbus is going to want to let go of him and Morris within the same window. But he could get one in the summer. But I would guess by the end of the season, he's probably got to move, because there's been plenty of smoke there. One thing I like is I know that he had been talking about he's more worried about either for Columbus or wherever else. He's more worried about playing. So hopefully that would be an indication that he's not going to make the same mistakes that Turner and Stefan did with going to teams where they're just bench players.
Yeah, and I think one of the first destinations I would say for him is Championship. Yeah. I think that'd be a really good spot.
Championship or Bundesliga,
but
would be good for him.
Yeah, I would love to see him at Bundesliga as well. It will come down to what team in Germany though, because some of them are very competitive, and we don't want him to be in a team that the defense is absolutely awful, and that's typically what happens to some of the bottom half teams. Is their defense is not that great. And you don't want him to face a regulation battle. But yeah, I think we need to roll with him for 2026 for the time being.
Yeah, him or Selena.
If he is the guy for 2026, I have no issues with it whatsoever. I mean, Gaga, I don't think he'd be ready for 2026, but I think he could be ready as a backup.
I think
that's the number two.
Yeah, I would take Schulte over Selena currently. But I think Selena can take that spot if he does well, club, if Chelsea doesn't screw him with loans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it looks like he may be going to Strasbourg next, which isn't a bad one to go for.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing too. So that makes sense, because that's Chelsea owns same ownership group and everything. So,
and when talking about the U23 guys as well, there's a lot of guys that are weak on that team, or some guys that has the potential but aren't really doing it week in, week out, like Wiley. at this point, with how things are looking with McKinney, Weah, Tyler Adams, and a few others, I don't think we're going to have as good a showing as we thought we would for 2026. And I think depending on how things go, if we get a new coach and who that coach is, I almost feel like it's going to be one of those things that we have to ground out 2026. Is hope for not something embarrassing, but probably not something where we're going to accomplish our goals and just start getting ready for 2030. Whoever the next coach is, depending on who it is, they should have a contract to 2030. Like if it's a big name guy that we can trust, that we can afford, have it till
Yeah,
2030.
obviously.
But if it's somebody who is not proven, it needs to be till
Yeah, obviously.
2026.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Obviously, it depends on who you're getting. If you're getting like, I mean, obviously Klopp, you're gonna want a long contract with him. But like if
Yeah,
I've heard Curtin throughout a few times, if you're signing him 26, give him to 26, see what he
yeah,
does. If if he does well, then sure, extend him again. But if not,
yeah,
then
and
you're not
yeah,
out anything. You're not having to fire him or anything. You're
yeah, and when
so
yeah, and when speaking on the coaches too, like you mentioned Jim Curtin, I I don't see him ever being good enough for a nation's senior team for a
yeah.
national team. I know Philly fans would probably bash you for saying that, but he's very good when it comes to the youth guys. I think at best he should be a U-23
Yeah, I,
coach for the national
Curtin
team.
is
I because he's so good with the young guys, but he's not so good when it comes to older guys.
Curtin is at best a sideways move. Honestly, like that's just how I feel. At best, that's just a sideways move
Hmm.
from Greg. It's he doesn't impress me very much. I mean, yeah, he's had some good Philly teams, but I mean, he hasn't won an MLS Cup with any of them. He hasn't. I don't even think he's won Open Cup. He's got
Yeah,
one Supporter Shield, I think, and their team currently is 12, I think.
yeah,
So it.
yeah. They're doing far worse. And this is talking about a team who has had two final appearances in the last 5 years. I think it's been. And I mean, it was underneath Jim Curtin, but still, uh, he definitely is one of those guys that kind of grinds it out. I can definitely see him doing the same thing that Berhalter
Yeah,
does: just
he's
grind it out, get to where we need to get, and then put in the throttle.
yeah,
But I know you have one particular manager in
I have
mind that I don't have much of an
yeah,
issue with for the
I got
moment.
two that are my current like realistic preferences. Like obviously there's the big name guys that like everyone would love to have, but like realistically, you're probably not going to get them. So the two that I'm really interested in are Pellegrino Matarazzo, who's at Hoffenheim, and then Nancy from Columbus. I mean, with Matarazzo, he's he's American, so that checks boxes for both for a lot of people because there's a lot of people, especially like within Federation, who would want an American manager. Um, he's got he's got plenty of European experience. I mean, he did really well at Stuttgart for his first like 3 seasons there, I believe, promoting them, getting them up to ninth in the Bundesliga, which is very well done with them. And uh, obviously, he's at Hoffenheim right now, so you'd have to pry him away from there. So you're probably going to have to spend a bit, but that realistically, paying the amount that you would probably have to pay him is not going to be as hard as like trying to spend to get Klopp or even like Low. And then with Nancy, I've watched. I like Columbus, so I've watched him a ton. He also had a good season at Montreal. He's very. He would be very affordable. I mean, he's only making 350K at Columbus, so you're not breaking the bank to get him, which I'm sure the Federation would absolutely love. I think he's much better
Yeah.
in MLS than either of Curtin or Cherundolo, who seem to be the other two that people like from MLS. His teams, I mean, he won the cup with Columbus last year, got him to CONCACAF Champions League final. Uh, he's got his teams don't struggle to score whatsoever, which is something this team has very much struggled with. And I think his style of play. I mean, he's got a 51 goal differential, a plus 51 goal differential at Columbus, and plus 18 when he was at Montreal, whose team is nowhere near as good as Columbus's was, but he got them to second, I think, in the league. Um, Comparatively, if you want to
Mhm.
compare him to Greg's time in Columbus, Greg had a plus 5 goal differential, and since he was rehired with the national team, only a plus 10. So
Yeah, and
significantly
I
better
think
there.
his win percentage was like 34% his whole time there.
36, I believe it was, and Nancy is 50. Yeah, 51.
Yeah, which is a major
Yeah,
jump. I mean, um, Columbus is a fun team to watch, and I watched all their games when they were playing
yes, it's a
CCC,
very attractive.
and you can definitely see that it's very attractive, and he knows what he's doing too. I mean, he's working with the players that he has. That's not a dig on Columbus; it's more of a dig on the fact that MLS isn't known for having all quality starting
Yeah,
11 players. So
I
he's
mean he's
doing good
turned.
jobs with what he's doing because he's making the tactics work
Yeah,
for
I
the
mean he's
team.
turned Zawadzki into being capable of playing like 3 different positions just because he has. That's just because they have to. Like he's played him effectively as like a center back, wing back, and midfielder, and now I think he's going to slot in for Morris's spot fairly easily. So I mean he's
Yeah,
obviously able to both fit his tactics to his players and fit his players to his tactics, something that Greg has largely failed to do. And just the style of play,
hmm
I believe, even if he sticks with the 3-4-3 he runs with Columbus, would still very much benefit this team. Especially, I think the three center backs would be good for this team because
hmm
just more solidity, and I think having Robinson and Dest as wingbacks would be very good for them, especially for Dest. I think, I mean, Cucho and Ballo, I think, play very similar games, and obviously Cucho's
yeah,
uh, beating the crap out of the MLS right now. So if he can translate that type of play to Ballo, that would do him wonders. I think even
hmm
uh, I could see him running because when he came, we still had Zellerine, who was more of a 10, like comparable, like more of a 10, like how Gio is more of a 10, but he played him still in that as like a pseudo winger under
hmm
Cucho, and he did incredibly well. I think that would even be a beneficial way to play Gio in that similar role to what Lucas played while he was there. Um, and so Lucas, or not Lucas, Pulisic, Ballo, and Reyna, that, and like at 3 up front, and then he played the midfield's a pivot, which would benefit our midfield very much, especially you get Johnny in
hmm
there with alongside Musa. I mean, that'd be great. I think a lot of the players fit comparatively to the way that Columbus plays would translate fairly well to the way the U.S. would play, or with the players that the U.S. has. Um, and I think
yeah,
it would get a
definitely.
new goalie, and I think he'd be very willing to start Schulte. Um,
Yeah,
and he's also had success away playing in Mexico, something this national team has struggled with forever. And I mean, he got
yeah, and any manager in MLS
yeah,
has
he's
struggled.
Yeah,
against teams in Mexico, or even vice
yeah,
versa,
because he
whatever.
went and got that win against Monterey, and then got that tie, and then advance through Tigres, which are not easy things to do by any means for anybody, but especially for
Hmm.
MLS teams. But he went and got
Yeah,
two like signature results. I mean, obviously the final didn't go his way, but defensively is where I have a little more concern. I don't think his teams are bad defensively. I do think uh, the defensive players that Columbus has aren't the greatest. Camacho's all right.
hmm but that's with
Yeah,
every
Camacho's
MLS
all
team.
right. Morera, he's all right. But he's also naturally a right back who's been switched to playing right center back. But he's still pretty good. But the only issue I really have defensively is they appear to be a bit open sometimes. You could see that in the CCC matches occasionally. But even so, partially, in my opinion, due to how good Schulte is, they're still they're the leading they're leading the league in fewest conceded right now. They've only got I think 18 conceded, so about goal a game. I mean, yes, they're played two fewer games, but still they're not. He's not got them playing poorly defensively. He's got some average defenders who are playing who he's got them to do pretty well.
Yeah, and when if I have to pick from MLS coaches, I would go with Nancy, as like you said, his style fits best with the players that we have right now, and especially when it comes to battle again, because of the fact that he is best on the transition, and we need a striker who scores goals. And Balogun can do that. Yeah, it wasn't great for him at Monaco, but you got to look at the formation that Monaco does. It doesn't really fit to his strength. They play with two strikers, and I think Nancy can provide that transition game, and he makes the striker the primary target for goals, and that would be your guy
Yeah,
Balogun.
and I mean he can.
But like,
I fully believe
go
Nancy
ahead.
would also be more willing to change formation if necessary. I mean, I think he can play his style and still do that 4-2-3-1 or I mean preferably not a 4-3-3. I don't think he'd play a 4-3-3 either. I think that'd be uh, damaging to the way his teams want to play. But he could probably
Mm-hmm.
I believe he could play a 4-2-3-1. But even if we do that 3-4-3 that he plays now, I think that would benefit the national team very much.
Mm-hmm. And kind of talk about other American managers. Uh, besides Jim Curtin is Hugo Perez and Tab Ramos. Uh, on Tab Ramos, I know a lot of guys that we talked to are big fans of his. So, I mean, at least with if you have to talk about guys that we're have to consider, he's one of the better options. I think he would really do a good job at player management with the guys. Uh, I do like the formation that he goes with because it would fit with kind of what we have. Because I've seen him when at Hartford, it was like a 4-2-3-1
Yeah,
at several occasions. I think he sometimes used wingbacks. From what I can remember with Houston, things weren't going too bad, but then it kind of went downhill for him. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, he was coaching there when they introduced the new logo, so it's been a while. But I remember him being on Football Americas, and he said that some of that has to do with the new ownership. When new ownership came in, they pretty much told them to throw the season and restart, and then that's when they got rid of him at the end of that season. Um, at Harvard, I don't think he was doing too bad. Yeah, when you look at the results, they weren't the greatest, but the biggest context to take into account when it comes to his time at Harvard was the players are pretty bad. They're one of the worst teams in the USL Championship, even before he took over, and even still now. They finished 12th last season, which they did fire him middle of the season. But right now they're in 10th in the East. I mean, there's not much of a they're not much better. So was it really Tab Ramos? I mean, I don't follow him heavily because I'm a Louisville fan, but I know from the times I watched him, it's definitely the team itself.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick between him or Hugo Perez, I would say Hugo Perez because he was doing wonders for Salvador. Yeah, don't just look at the results for his time at El Salvador because that's misleading. Because as you know from watching him when he was managing El Salvador the past couple of years, they were holding their own against some of the big names like us, nearly getting a draw against us in the Nations League underneath Hudson, and then I think he got a draw against Mexico even at one point. I mean, even games that they lost, it was towards the very end that they could see those goals. Uh, you also had that match, the mud fest that we had with them in El Salvador. That was a heated game too, and that was all him. And he is a much older guy that you could just look at a picture of him and you can say like, yeah, this guy has some authority. He definitely makes sure that people know he's in charge. Yeah, I mean, he definitely has that presence about him that I really like. I think that his tactics will work very well for us, and he's definitely going to build plan based on the team that we're going to face. It's not going to be the same exact tactic every single game that we see with Berhalter or making that very little minor change in the tactics. If he thinks this is a team that we're going to have to grind against, he's going to make sure that we grind against them and hold our own. But if it's a team that we should beat, I imagine that he's going to say, we're going to win this game, and this is how we're going to do it. He's going to make sure that we win it. Keep in mind when it comes to these two guys, they both have history with USSF. That's a positive, but the negative was they didn't have the best exit when they left USSF. But in addition to that, that was the last guys in charge. This whole new guys in charge now, so that could be different now, especially when you have Matt Crocker, which, yes, you can say what you want about Matt Crocker, but he has no history with USSF. Imagine if these guys are contenders, they're going to give him a clean slate.
So with Ramos, his time at Houston, I'm looking at their finishes before and after he was there. They're comparable up until 23 when they finished fourth in conference, ninth overall. They were 25th, 19th, 17th before that. So it wasn't how much you can blame that on him versus just Houston being bad is debatable.
Especially back then, they were a really bad team, but this new ownership has really improved the team. I mean, they just won the Open Cup last year. So that's one thing that you have to take into account when they talk about Tab Ramos as time there is how much was it to ownership. And you gotta look at that roster. Those rosters at the time were just awful.
Yeah, because there was a stretch from like pretty much 2014 to like 2022 that was just they didn't finish higher overall than 4th or 10th. They had one season that they finished 10th. Everything else was was like 14 or lower. So it was just he was just part of a very bad stretch for that team.
Yeah, I mean, what was your thoughts on Hugo?
I mean he wouldn't be my favorite you can get, but I would happily take him. I think I think it'd be an improvement. I think his teams are more competitive than you really have an expectation for them to be. I mean, to be honest, I'd take about anyone other than Greg, but he would.
That's a fact.
He would he's up there for ones like that realistically would be considered. I mean, like because some of the other
Hmm.
guys that they're probably like realistically interested in are like Jim Curtin, Steve Cherundolo. I would happily take Perez over either of those two guys. Same with
Yeah.
Ramos. Probably same with Ramos. Likely. I mean, Curtin, like we've talked about, sideways move in my opinion. He played from what I've watched with Philly is a very just seems like a very similar type to what we get now. There's
Hmm.
Cherundolo, I would say is would be an improvement. I mean, he's had some good LAFC teams, some LAFC teams that that are no shortage of scoring capacity, um, and they I believe they won an MLS Cup. Um, but my
Yeah. Yeah, they won when he was in
yeah,
charge. Yeah.
but my thing with him, I do think he'd be an improvement. However, if we're gonna go with an MLS coach, I'd rather take Nancy because I mean Nancy just beat him
Yeah.
in an MLS Cup and finished above him in Supporters Shield standings too. So I mean head to head it would obviously appear hey they're Nancy's the better coach because I would even argue that LAFC would
Yeah.
has a man for man probably stronger team than Columbus does, but Columbus just the way they play as a team is much better than I've seen from LAFC. So he
Hmm.
wouldn't be the worst guy you can possibly get, but if the USSF's dead set on a MLS manager, I would hope for they would take Nancy over Trundolo and definitely over Curtin.
Yeah, I would definitely would say Hugo is my favorite option if we're being talk about realistic options, and then I would say uh, Nancy. I know that a name that hasn't been really mentioned, but I would not be surprised is in consideration, depending on how we do in the Olympics, is Marko Mitrovic, our U23 coach. I've been pleased by how they've been doing in the camps leading up to the Olympics. The only one that's really been of concern was that Japanese friendly. Now they did have a closed door match against Japan the week prior, so but no one knows how that went. But if we have to hire someone within USSF, I will take Marco. But I also would not be surprised if he was to become the interim manager with the possibility of being the permanent
Yeah,
manager. Either one of those options I'm fine with if we're looking at that type of
yeah. I mean, I'm not
situation.
going to be like advocating for them to promote him, but he's not someone
Mm-hmm.
where I would be disappointed if he was promoted. I mean, if the Olympic team goes out and sucks in the Olympics, then yeah, I'm probably going to be a little mad if they
Yeah.
decide to promote him. But I mean, if he gets promoted, they do well in the Olympics. I wouldn't complain. I mean, I wouldn't think it's the best possible. I wouldn't think it's the best we could have done, but I'm going to give him a chance. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
be like this is a failure.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely that's knowing how USSF is, that's definitely not out of the realm. A possibility as an option. But to speak on two individuals that I is a possibility, but are probably still a little out there is Joachim Löw and Jürgen Klopp. The only reason why people are even saying Jürgen Klopp is that Q&A that was done with Liverpool. Someone within Liverpool was the fact that he said that he will only manage Germany or the U.S. Obviously, Germany is taken, so it's just U.S. Um, but it's a matter of is USSF willing to spend the money? And at this point, with where we're at right now with U.S. soccer and where our players are at, we needed someone that is competent, someone that has some weight in their name, and the USSF needs to put their money where their mouth is. And as someone of high status like him, It's and they have the money. We all know they have the money, but they have this little BS cap on their salary of like 2 million, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
Greg's like
And I think it's
2.2 or
kind of
something like that.
bull crap because you're just yeah, and I think part of that was a pay
It was
raise they
bonus.
gave
Yeah, it
him.
was like 2.2 after
It
bonuses.
yeah, yeah. Um, but especially when we got the World Cup coming, and with how this Copa America went, we need somebody that is going to prevent an embarrassment. Because the last thing we need is another embarrassment, especially on home soil
Yeah,
hosting the World Cup. And we're anyone who follows soccer knows what Klopp has done, and I think he's a perfect match for it. It will happen, probably not, simply because USSF is stingy about their money. And the other one is love. Yeah, people who probably haven't watched soccer for very long all think that he's crap because what happened with Germany after the World Cup in 2018 and qualifications after that. But prior to 2018, Germany was one of the best, if not the best team in the world. Um, in 2010, I think that was the World Cup they hosted. They finished
yeah,
third. Then they won it in 2014, and they won the Confederations Cup in 2017. That was all underneath love.
yeah. The Germany's struggles from that like period up until like the last like probably year, I think was just kind of wasn't on him because it wasn't necessarily on him or an indication
Mm-hmm.
of his coaching by any means because you had other coaches, including some good coaches, come in there and couldn't do anything either. I think that was a period of change for Germany pretty much. And I think you would have had some of those struggles regardless of who was coaching them. So I don't hold that too much against him. I definitely think
Mm-hmm.
he is the best coach we realistically can hope to get. I think. I mean, Klopp,
Yeah, with
yeah,
some
Klopp.
status.
Yes, theoretically, yes, we could afford him, and based on that Q&A, it wouldn't take much convincing to get him here. But like, my yes, can we afford him? Yes. Will we spend that much? No, there's no way. There's no way we'll spend as much as it would require to get
Yeah.
him. Low on the other hand, I don't think it's gonna would cost near as much. I don't think he's had a team in a little while, so
Mm-hmm.
you could,
Yeah, it was he was sacked in 2021, and he
yeah,
hasn't
that's what
coached
I thought.
since.
So he, you could get him for not cheap. You're going to have to open the pocketbook there. You're not. I don't think you're getting him for 2.2 million. But you can go and get
Yeah,
him.
but he definitely took a
Yeah,
pay cut.
I mean to just get a job, he would
Yeah.
probably be like, yeah, I could see him taking less than what you would have expected him to get after, even directly after he was fired. Um, and I mean, USSF
Yeah.
has shown, at least with the way they handled the women's team, that they are willing to go out and get a good coach for a team. I mean, they went out and got Hayes, who's fantastic, and um,
Yeah. I mean, she's the best female coach right now on the
yeah.
women's side.
So
Uh,
logically, you
yeah.
would
But I mean, yeah,
logically
yeah,
you would think they would want, if you're willing to go out and get like the best coach you can possibly get for the women, you should you would logically expect them to treat the men's coach in a similar manner. Obviously, there are some people who want to talk about like them having to pay the women's coach the same, which I'm pretty sure I've seen several things that you don't have to pay them the same. Him and Greg,
yeah. That has
yeah,
been confirmed.
because
Yeah.
I've looked it up. Greg and Hayes aren't even paid the same. He's paid like 200,000 more, and he was paid like almost a million more than Vlatko was. So that's just,
Hmm.
if they use that as reasoning, like we want to pay them similarly or the same, that's just them making an excuse. And there's no, or if they really care about paying them the same, up Emma's salary too, so both teams have a good coach, and then you've now set the market for women's teams coaches if you up it to anywhere
Yeah.
near what a good men's teams coach is going to cost you. You've now set the market for the women's team, so anyone who wants to get a good coach is now going to have to likely match that. So there's no
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like Matt Crocker because of the fact that
there's
yeah.
no there's no excuse anymore. There's no valid excuse not to,
Hmm.
like, I get if they don't, if I can understand not wanting to pay what you'd have to pay to get Klopp. I can understand that a little more, but not wanting to go out and spend to get like Low or someone else along the caliber, even a Matarazzo, that's that's not acceptable. That's not, like, if they don't want to come, okay, I can
Yeah.
accept that, but just not wanting to pay that is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like to have Matarazzo, and he checks off all the boxes that they want. It's a matter of way he'd be willing to leave, and I think it'd be hard because he just qualified Hoffenheim for a UEFA competition. I think it was the Confederations Cup. I can't remember exactly.
I
Conference
think,
Cup. Um, yeah. They it was
yeah,
Conference
that's what I.
Cup. Now that I remember, because they had to rely on the finals for the Pokal. But
Yeah,
I
they're in
want to say he will want to.
yeah, because it's like I thought they were in that similar position to what Chelsea was, where they needed other results to kind of go their way to get. I mean, obviously for Chelsea, they needed
Yeah,
the result to get. They were getting Conference League either way, but like it was a similar position. That's why I remembered that. Uh,
yeah, and if he is an option, he is open to it. I want
yeah,
him, but I just don't think he will because I think he will want to take charge of Hoffenheim for this coming season in their
yeah,
Conference
he
League
he is
campaign.
one that,
Uh,
like, he's realistically you could get him, but I also would not be at all surprised if, unless US comes in, they're offering way more than he's making at Hoffenheim now. He's like, no, I want to see this out with Hoffenheim, and I wouldn't blame him at all for doing that.
yeah, and I think we'll see John Brooks again. but uh, but yeah, as I was trying to say is that with Matt Crocker, I get a lot of people have issues with him just simply because he um, rehire Berhalter, but we all know how things are with USSF. Part of me feels like that's not entirely his off
Yeah,
choice. I feel like there was someone else, but part of the reason why he was brought in was to trying to make us more European, and he did that with bringing in Emma Hayes. So who say that he wouldn't do it for us at the
yeah,
men's
the Emma
side?
Hayes.
I think it's just a wait and see what happens. If he does it for the men's side, then that's great. We honestly know what the direction of this
Yeah,
federation is.
like he deserves criticism for rehiring him. Yes, like absolutely criticize him for rehiring him,
Yeah,
but like solely blaming him or wanting him completely out of the federation because just because of that hiring, despite him otherwise being decent in his role, I'd say is excessive to me. And
mm-hmm.
also, um, I know there is a significant portion that do pr- mostly care about the men's team, but it is annoying to want someone who's done a good job for the women's team, especially after the USSF had previously absolutely botched hiring Vlatko. That failed miserably. Uh,
Yeah,
to want him fired, or to think he is entirely bad at his job because of something that likely wasn't entirely his choice anyway. After he's proven, like, hiring
mm-hmm.
Hayes to me indicates more is more of an indication to me of what he is capable and wants to do than hiring Greg is.
Yeah,
That's something that is more
yeah,
indi- indicative to me of how higher ups in the federation want the men's team to be run than how Crocker wants it to be run.
Yeah, and I think another indication was last year he went on CBS's Galasso show and said that he has an issue with this pay to play and that he wants to
I
change
remember
that.
that.
It obviously it hasn't happened yet, but that I think that's an indication he wants to change things. But there's others, especially in
Yeah,
that
I think
board of trustees and all them, that don't want that change. He can have that title of director of sports, but I honestly don't think he has all that power that we think he does. Because this is what they say that you have the power to do.
I don't want to
Also,
be
there's others behind
I don't want
closed
to be
doors.
too cynical in saying this, but his hiring seems like the type of hiring that they would do to try and placate some of the people who were frustrated with how things have been handled, because like he's got that European background.
Yeah.
He's not that guy who's got a history with the rest of the federation, with the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
NT. So he's that outside voice that, again, not trying to be conspiratorial or like incredibly cynical about this, but like I could easily see it being that kind of bringing in a voice to try and placate the fans who wanted Greg out, who've consistently wanted that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like that could very easily be what it is, and he just gets ends up being overruled on certain stuff with the men's team, but's been given more leeway with
Mm-hmm.
the women's team.
Yeah. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what they do after this review, depending on how long it is and what the outcome of it is, to really kind of determine what type of person he is when it comes to the men's side. Um, yeah. And it was him that put out that statement. So this is a wait and see at
Yeah.
this point. Um, I know we're over an hour now. Pretty much kind of cover everything that we want to talk about. The Olympic roster will drop on Monday on the men's side. So obviously we'll probably give our takes on the roster and what we will think will happen at the Olympics in our next
Yep.
episode. Do you have any closing arguments?
No, just I mean, just hoping for the best for this that investigation with the federation. Hoping, I mean, they lost support from like American Outlaws, which I didn't expect to happen. So I mean, it would seem
Yeah, I didn't either. That was a complete shock
yeah,
this
I mean, it would
morning.
seem most indications point to him being out, but I mean, unfortunately, it's a wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
But
All right. Well, we'll catch you all later on Yanks Footy.